This is a real photo from an exorcism. You'll see the full image and many far worse than this later in this video. A friend of mine recently sent me videos featuring a Catholic exorcist who has actually posted photos from cases that he's personally worked on. Some of these photos will shock you, others will maybe scare you, and a few might even repulse you. But more importantly, they might just change your entire worldview. Before we get to these shocking images, and believe me, they are pretty shocking, I want to introduce you to the exorcist behind these disturbing photos. This is Msgr Stephen J. Rossetti, one of the most visible and respected exorcists in the Catholic Church today. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, who exactly is this guy, and why should we believe that his photos aren't staged? These are very good questions. I'm really glad that you asked. Msgr Rossetti isn't just a priest. He's also a licensed psychologist, an author, and a former intelligence officer who graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy. He has a PhD in counseling psychology, has served as president of the St. Luke Institute, and for the last 15 years, he's been conducting exorcisms for the Archdiocese of Washington. This is a guy with serious credentials, serious authority, and frankly, a serious amount to lose by fabricating evidence. Now that you know who Rossetti is and why we should take him seriously, let's get to these images. And just a quick warning, if you're easily unsettled, this is your last chance to turn off this video. All right, with Rossetti's credentials on the table, it's time to examine some of the most visually jarring signs of possession, mysterious scratches and bruises. Let's start with this first case.
And this is interesting, that this person came to once at my office, and she had these strange bruises and scratches, and you were saying, you know, where'd you get those? She thought it was demonic, and I said, nah, go home. And then it turned out that she actually was possessed. That one of the signs of it, ancillary signs, these unexplained scratches and bruises. It makes sense though. Why? What does Satan try to do? He tries to destroy and to kill and to maim, if he can. That's Satan's plan. You know, what's shocking these days when you look at some of the things online that young people are saying, you know, Satan's is your friend. They got statues of Baphomet. You ever seen the statues of Baphomet thing? Yeah. I've got someone who's possessed by a bunch of demons. The Baphomet's the head demon, and she said he is vicious. And he basically tortures everyone. He knows what your weaknesses are, and he'll torture with you with them. You know, Baphomet is not your friend.
So here, Rossetti describes a woman who came to his office with these deep bruises that she couldn't explain. She suspected demonic involvement, and as it turns out, she was right. She's one of the rare exceptions, and he even later confirmed that she was possessed. And notice, this is not some random woman on the internet posting weird body marks, okay, on her X account. This is a documented case handled by a church-authorized exorcist where the injuries had no known cause and align with what he describes as a classic sign of demonic affliction. From a medical standpoint, spontaneous injuries without trauma, especially ones that correlate with spiritual symptoms, should not exist. But here they are. Now, take a look at this next image.
If you want to say what is an exorcism and what's this whole thing about, it's very simple. Satan basically says, you belong to me. You belong to me. This is a real picture. I use these with possession, permission. I got possession of my brain. Permission. Back of her neck, possessed woman. Showed up in the morning, preternaturally, disappeared in a couple days, which is impossible. It's an upside down cross. See, Satan he takes holy things and he twists them. Why is 3 o'clock in the morning the demonic hour? Because he takes the 3 o'clock hour that Jesus died and twists it in the middle of the night. That's why at 3 in the morning, if something bad's going to happen, sometimes it's 3 in the morning. And so anyway, Satan's basically saying, this woman belongs to me. She's mine. And oftentimes one of the first words you're going to hear out of a possessed person's mouth when they're manifesting is, he belongs to me.
This photo shows an upside down cross that appeared overnight on a woman's neck and then completely vanished within days. Rossetti interprets this as a sort of mockery of Christ's crucifixion, a signature of demonic symbolism. Temporary skin marks that manifest and disappear without explanation and carry specific theological meaning are very hard to chalk up to coincidence. This isn't just skin irritation or bruising, it's symbolic, timely, and coordinated with known patterns in exorcism cases. But if you thought that was strange, the next image is even more disturbing.
Sometimes people, the demonic scratches, you wake up in the morning and all of a sudden there's this, demonic scratches. One possessed woman woke up with these, can you see it on her back? Like, as someone said, it looked like a beast raked his claws across her back. That's exactly what happened. A demonic claw went right down her back. And then she didn't feel it. She woke up, never felt it, and then it disappeared in 2 or 3 days. That's impossible. It's preternatural. Yeah.
Now, here what we see, what appear to be claw marks. Rossetti says that they suddenly appeared, felt like a beast raked its claws down the woman's back, but she felt no pain. Just like the cross, they disappeared within 2 to 3 days. Injuries that look like animal attacks but appear spontaneously without pain and vanish without scarring, this flat out contradicts what we know about how the human body works. And again, these are photographed and described by a clinical psychologist who's also an exorcist with a lot to lose by faking these photos. Now, this is not the first time that this has happened, right? In the media, Tucker Carlson recently described that he experienced a very similar situation. He had claw marks on his side and on his back. I had Father Carlos Martins on the channel to give his assessment of that situation. If you'd like to watch that video, I've got it linked for right here for you guys. But the reason that these images are so powerful isn't just the shock factor, okay? It's what they imply. If any of this is real, even just one photo, then we're staring straight into the supernatural. And the deeper that we go in these photos, the stranger it gets, because the next group of images centers on something even more unsettling: the eyes of the possessed. All right, quick pause. If you appreciate this type of content that I'm putting together here, the deep research, the rare footage, then consider supporting the channel on Patreon. Videos like this take a ton of time, editing and behind the scenes work to produce. Plus, YouTube doesn't exactly like this type of content. So if you'd like to help keep this channel alive, no pun intended, and help me expose the intellectual and supernatural side of Christianity, head over to our Patreon linked in the description. Even just $5 a month makes a huge difference. And you'll also join a growing group of Christians that love God with all their minds. All right, back to the insanity. We've seen scratches and bruises that shouldn't exist, but now we're stepping into much darker territory. These next images don't just show physical injuries. They show something much deeper: the distortion of the human face itself. According to Msgr Rossetti, these photos were not staged, they were not altered, and they capture something almost no one ever sees: the eyes of the possessed. Let's start with this first image.
I'm a psychologist. All I can say is this is a common question that I get is it a psychological illness or an evil spirit? It's a complex question many times, but usually you can answer it fairly quickly after a few sessions. After a few sessions, you should have a good idea whether it's a possession case or a psychological illness. But sometimes, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure it out. Here's a guy who's manifesting. He had normal eyes, and his eyes turned into the eyes of a serpent. You get those dots, and the eyes turned yellow.
In this clip, Rossetti describes a man whose eyes suddenly transformed during a possession episode. His normal eyes shifted into what Rossetti calls serpent eyes, with a yellow, almost reptilian hue in the irises. In nature, several species of serpents, like the mangrove snake or the boomslang, have striking yellow or gold eyes with round pupils. In Scripture, of course, the serpent is the ultimate symbol of deception and evil. Genesis 3 introduces Satan in the form of serpent, and then in Revelation 12, it explicitly calls him that serpent who leads the whole world astray. So when someone's eyes suddenly resemble a snake's, not just symbolically, but visually, it's not just unsettling. It's actually theologically loaded. You're looking directly at a biblical archetype coming to life. And it gets worse, like a lot worse.
So there are lots of people who are what we call partially possessed or oppressed or obsessed, and they're not fully possessed, but they really do have a demonic problem. So there's a whole range of of demonic involvement. Here's another person, her eyes turned black, both of them, fully black. And, the discernment was not hard.
This clip shows a woman whose eyes became entirely black. No whites, no iris, nothing, just full blackness. Rossetti says almost casually, discernment was not hard. Fully black eyes are not just like a little abnormal. They're medically impossible without prosthetics or very, very serious trauma. But this wasn't Halloween makeup. According to Rossetti, this transformation happened during an episode of possession and reversed on its own. If he's telling the truth about these photos, there's something supernatural that's overridden the basic laws of biology. Remember, this isn't happening in a movie. Okay, this is a licensed psychologist and diocesan exorcist recounting events in a medical and pastoral setting. The consistent theme in both of these cases, the eyes reflect the presence of something inhuman. And in Christian theology, that actually makes perfect sense. The eyes are often described, as the window to the soul, but in these images, it's like something else is staring back. All right, before we move on to the most disturbing set of photos yet, and trust me, I'm not exaggerating when I say that, I want to remind you why I've personally taken such a deep interest in exorcisms and demonic possession. If demonic possession is real, and based on the evidence so far, it's getting really hard to deny, then the implications are massive. During exorcisms, it consistently appears that demons operate under a uniquely Christian framework. They respond to Christian prayers, fear Christian symbols, and most importantly, are expelled through Christian rituals. This isn't just Rossetti's experience either. Take the Ammons haunting in Indiana, where a mother and her children were tormented by paranormal activity for months. Psychics, clairvoyance, and folk remedies failed completely. It wasn't until a Catholic priest performed 3 formal exorcisms that the manifestations stopped. And that's according to a Department of Child Services report and hospital staff. Or consider Cedric Kanana, a Rwandan man whose family tried indigenous rituals and even Muslim exorcisms with absolutely no success. Only after turning to an Anglican priest and receiving deliverance prayers in Jesus' name did he recover, later becoming a pastor himself. Even in Cairo, a Muslim man brought their possessed mother to a Coptic Christian exorcist after their local Muslim imam couldn't do anything to help her. The demon reportedly fled only after the priest invoked the Trinity, something that left even the Muslim family stunned. In case after case, only Christian rites seem to have the power to stop what nothing else could. So if we're being intellectually honest, these aren't just creepy stories. We're seeing a consistent pattern of reports across continents, across cultures, and even time periods of supernatural beings obeying only Christian authority. And that should make you actually pause. If demons are real and they bow to Jesus alone, that's not just spooky, it's a powerful argument that Christianity is true. Now buckle up, because we're about to step into the weirdest, strangest, most bizarre part of this video. If you're squeamish or the type to look away, now's your chance. We've seen bruises, we've seen eyes, but now we're entering truly bizarre territory. What you're about to witness are photos of objects. Yes, physical objects that were allegedly expelled from possessed individuals during exorcisms. These are things that should not be in a human body, period. If any of this is real, even just one case, we're no longer in naturalistic territory. Let's begin with this very strange and frankly unbelievable example.
Do the possessed, I've seen, and again, going to Hollywood, where bodies levitate and where the possessed are spitting out nails. Obviously, you dismiss the idea of the head turning and just beds rocking and boil coming from under the window panes, that kind of stuff. Does that happen?
This was spit out of someone at the end of an exorcism a few weeks ago.
One looks like a bolt
in a washer. Now, this was not in the person's stomach. It vomited out, right? When part of the healing process, people will often vomit this white foam, not food, it's white foam, and they'll vomit this stuff And sometimes they'll vomit things which would not be in their bodies, but materialize in their mouth. And there've been all sorts of crazy things. But this happened just very recently. We had someone who had previously been a drug addict, and it was clean. These needles kept falling off them, which materialized.
Wow. So the material spat out those needles?
This actually would materialize and fell off his body, which would.
I see.
You watch them fall off his body.
I gotcha.
But these were actually spit out, and yes, they do spit out crazy things. And so at times things happen in an exorcism which are humanly impossible. Now we have not had a levitation yet, although I know some teams that have, and I'm sure it's just a question of time, before we do.
Rossetti describes how at the end of an exorcism, a person spat out a bolt and washer. These weren't like swallowed items. According to him, they materialized in the person's mouth and then were coughed out. He also mentions another case, a former drug addict, where needles repeatedly materialized and fell off his body during the healing process. Now look, either Rossetti is completely making this stuff up entirely, or you have to contend with what kind of force can insert like solid metal into the human body and then somehow remove it. But did you actually catch what Rossetti said at the end of this clip?
Now, we have not had a levitation yet, although I know some teams that have, and I'm sure it's just a question of time, before we do.
That line is actually really crucial. Okay, this is the kind of thing that hoaxers don't say. He's not pretending to have seen every kind of like spooky phenomenon. In fact, he's admitting he hasn't seen the most cinematic one, the levitation. And that honesty actually strengthens his credibility. If he were trying to impress you, that's the first thing he'd fake, right? Instead, what you see is a guy who's actually telling the truth or pulling off one of the most elaborate spiritual frauds in modern history. All right, let's move on. And just to warn you guys, this one does get pretty gross.
What do we do in an exorcism? They go to confession, yes, but it's a process of purification, as it is for all of us. By the way, this is what one of our possessed people coughed up. Yeah, it is that bad. And that's why, if that was in her stomach, she would have died, right? It's black. And actually, the doctor said it was moving. It was sitting there moving. And someone said, you should do a DNA on it or do a scientific chemical. I said, what are you kidding me? We flushed it down the toilet and threw holy water on it. We're not going to. So anyway, yeah, it was just, you're looking at a picture of it, and it happened several times with her. She was cursed. Her mother was a witch, and they cursed her big time. And my mother was a witch. She actually was a witch, most 16-year-olds think their mothers are witches, but she happened to be one. There you go. Okay. So, yeah, she was cursed, and this is what came out. You want to go, really? Yes, you.
Rossetti recounts a woman coughing up this like black tar-like substance. A doctor was present and said the material was moving, not metaphorically, but visibly. And it was also toxic, according to Rossetti, toxic enough that it would have killed her if she swallowed it. And look, this wasn't done in private, and it wasn't anecdotal. A medical doctor witnessed it and confirmed that it was animated. Just think about that for a second. There are very few substances in the world that just sort of move on their own, and none that spontaneously form inside a person's body during prayer. And yet, that's exactly what's being claimed here. But now brace yourself, because there's another really disgusting example.
By the way, this is someone we have has been cursed by a bunch of witches, big time. And she vomited up this black fluid, and it hardened. Oh, this is a real photograph. Hardened. It oftentimes when we reverse curses and get rid of them, sometimes the people will pass out of one of their orifices of their body some sign of spiritual sign of the curse being lifted. In this case, this black stuff came out of her and solidified.
This photo shows a dark black liquid expelled by a woman who had been cursed by multiple witches. The liquid, according to Rossetti, hardened almost immediately. He says that this is a common thing that happens when curses are reversed, some physical sign of the curse like sort of exiting the body. Now look, if this were just like one story, you could maybe chalk it up to coincidence or fakery, but the repetition matters. Over and over, we're seeing symbolically charged, medically inexplicable matter emerging from victims. And in every case, it happens in the context of Christian prayer and ritual, not New Age meditation, not secular therapy, not Islamic deliverance prayers, but explicitly Trinitarian invocations. At this point, I get it, like you're either completely convinced, totally skeptical, or somewhere in between, or you might just be really, really grossed out. Stick around, because in these last couple of minutes, I'm going to explain exactly why these bizarre images cannot be easily dismissed as clever hoaxes. First, consider Rossetti himself a reluctant witness. Remember earlier when he openly admitted that he's never seen the most cinematic phenomenon of all, levitation? Liars and fraudsters typically exaggerate their claims for dramatic effect. Rossetti doesn't, though. Instead, he sets a tone of measured honesty. If he were trying to trick us, he's going about it in a really weird way. Second, he explicitly said, these are real photos. I didn't Photoshop these things, to a room full of skeptical priests.
This is sort of the core of an exorcism, and actually all of life, frankly. What is this on the side of this bird? These, by the way, all the photos you're going to see are real photos. I gave this talk to a bunch of priests or something similar, and they all said, I don't believe this. I don't believe those photos. These are real photos, by the way. I didn't Photoshop these things.
Think about the stakes here. Okay, he put his professional and personal reputation on the line by showing these photos. Either he's carrying out one of the most audacious and risky hoaxes ever seen in modern religious history, or he's genuinely documenting supernatural phenomenon. If you're committed to dismissing this evidence somehow, you've got to provide some kind of naturalistic explanation that covers all of these phenomena. Overnight injuries that heal impossibly fast, verified object materialization, consistent symbolic patterns across multiple cases, and a credible, highly respected witness who's explicitly avoided sensationalism. Honestly, the simplest explanation might be the hardest one for skeptics to accept, that at least some of these incidents are genuinely supernatural. So, what is your verdict? Are we looking at the hoax of the century, or is this chilling evidence that evil, supernatural evil, is real? Drop your thoughts below, and as always, remember, Christianity is true.